2011 Michigan State Spartans. I'm Marco D'Angelo, joined today by Michigan's own Johnny Detroit. You're going to talk about Michigan State. I thought you were a Michigan guy.
I'm a guy who likes to gamble, so.
Right.
And I don't want to get too much into the Michigan Wolverines until I see what they could do. It's been a depressing couple of years being a Michigan fan. Especially last year, that first game out, Denard when ball is out, and with the game against UConn, and I'm like, oh yes, Rich's Rod's offensive scheme. You
jumped on board. You bought into it, didn't you?
Oh, and they
hook, line,
crashing back down to earth.
Are you glad they got rid of him?
Yes.
Okay.
I like the hire. I really felt that bringing him on board and changing up the offensive schemes, and Michigan fans are going to hate when I say this, but historically, Michigan, to me, is a very good program, an elite Big Ten school, and a very good national, that their way of doing things wins in the Big Ten, but historically, when they play out of conference in a major bowl game, they lose. Even the mighty Bo Schembechler lost his first 8 bowl games. So my thought is I'm tired of caring about winning the Big Ten or beating Ohio State and then going in the Rose Bowl to get our asses beat by USC. This isn't 1972. I want to compete nationally, and to compete nationally, you have to think nationally, and I thought he was the answer, and I was obviously wrong. So to jump into Michigan State, I think out of all the sports, I think college football, if any, and I'm a big math guy. I'm doing really well, and my fans on Twitter could attest to this. I'm doing really well in the WNBA. You couldn't force me to watch a WNBA game. My stuff is all situational math, tips from offshore.
Russian women running up and down in their shorts?
Dude, I care about the WNBA as much as I did about Amy Winehouse. To me, it was all mathematical stuff. College football, I think, is one of those sports when you watch a lot of the games, especially regional teams, you'll see things, the way the game ends up, that the box score and that final score or the highlights on ESPN don't show. And I watched almost every Michigan State game, and I really thought that they were a fraud, in that record. People are going to disagree with me. A lot of the books that I reviewed disagree with me. I bet a lot of money on Alabama in the bowl game because I knew Alabama was going to destroy them, and they did, 49-7. But give them props. I mean, they were 11-2 last year by the end, factoring the Alabama loss. They're 7-1 in the Big Ten. They had the most wins in school history, and it was their first share of the Big Ten title in 20 years. A lot of people have a lot of expectations for Michigan State coming into this year. But I look at last year, and I say, okay, you got smoked by Alabama, which everyone could see. You had your game in September against Notre Dame where you went to overtime. You squeaked one out 34-31. In October, you were down 17 to Northwestern. You come back, you win 35-27. You're down 18 to Purdue. You come back, win 35-31, and you got a close one against Penn State, 28-22. So they could have lost easily 2 of those games. They are 5-0 in games decided by 10 or less. So every close game, every bounce of the ball, every bad break, they didn't go against them. It benefited them. So they were, the benefit of, all the breaks kind of went their way in the close games, which, you kind of need to have happen. And I look at this year's schedule, and, they got 2 cupcakes out the gate. They got Youngstown State and Florida Atlantic. They go to Notre Dame. Early line, Notre Dame favored by 7. I think Notre Dame under Kelly is going to be a squad to watch this year. I marked that up as a loss instantly. They come back home and play Central Michigan. Thinking Mac School, Central Michigan. Central Michigan, historically, they play really strong. It's an in-state school. You got kids who maybe wanted to go to Michigan State. They get picked up by Central. They play, and Central's upset and shocked State, a couple times over the last couple years. Not saying they're going to lose that game, but don't mark that as an automatic W, every single time. Then they go on the road to Ohio State, and I like this game. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it's the final leg of Ohio State with their starters not playing. Ohio State in this game is going to whoop Michigan State because you can't forget the fact that a lot of the Ohio State kids who are going to be playing in those spots are going to play, they're studs. Mm-hmm. They got a top recruiting class. Michigan State is on an 0-7 run against Ohio State, and they've only kept 1 game under 10 points out of those 7 losses. So they're going to lose there. Then they travel to Michigan. That one's an iffy one. Right now, the early line has State favored by 6. That can go any way. You got the rivalry. You got State owning Michigan the past couple years, and Michigan State letting Michigan know out loud that they've owned them. So we'll see what happens with the new Michigan regime. So that game's an iffy one. Then they play at home to Wisconsin, who, right now that they're underdogs. They're actually at the game's a coin flip, depending where you look. It's either one either way. Wisconsin with the quarterback, they're going to remember that loss to Michigan State last year. I think that's an iffy either way. So we're going to put that in the iffy column. Then they go to Nebraska. Early line Nebraska, favored by 8. Nebraska is going to hand them their ass. Loss. Then they play Minnesota. I'll give you that when they beat Minnesota. Then they go on the road again to Iowa, who destroyed them last year. I know that was your game of the year last year. They're on Iowa. Right now the game is pretty much a coin flip. They have not won in Iowa since 1989. So I don't care all this Michigan State hype. I like Iowa at home to continue that long streak. Then they go on the road to Indiana. We'll give them, or they're back home against Indiana. I'll give them that one. Now this is the game that's going to be make or break. I think it's going to be set in stone, this win, prior to this game coming up. But let's, for sake of argument, say the gambler junkiness of saying, final game of the season where they win or lose. They go on the road to Northwestern. Right now, they're favored by 2.5, so under a field goal. Northwestern was smoking them last year and pissed that game away. Yeah. They have more Letterman returning to their squad this year than any team in the Big Ten. I guarantee you Northwestern has that game circled. Whether it's to decide what bowl they go to, maybe whether they go to a bowl at all, I really think that they're going to also lose that game. I have Michigan State losing anywhere to 4 to 5 games.
I can't disagree with you. I know the easy way to look at this is people are going to say they were 11-2 last year. They're bringing back a fifth-year quarterback in Cousins. They've got, the running backs back. The nucleus of that offense is all there, and there's no question. This offense put up a ton of points last year.
Right.
I mean, they had games 38 against Western Michigan, Florida Atlantic, forget 30, 34 against Notre Dame, 45 against Northern Colorado, 34 against Wisconsin, 34 against Michigan. Of course, Michigan couldn't stop anybody, so, sorry about that.
Me, you, Dustin, RJ, we could put a team of the pregame pros and have,
flag football and score on it. But this is the situation that if you just look at the surface, it's an automatic, this team's got to go over. I look at you, like you broke the schedule down. When you've got road games that consist of Notre Dame, Ohio State, Nebraska, and Iowa, and a major revenge game at Northwestern, right there, just that part of the schedule, those 5 games, they can lose 4 out of 5 or all 5 of those.
And then that still leaves, the Michigan game and other games that are kind of variables. And I think a lot of people don't realize, too, is Michigan State, if you pull their schedule from last year and you look at the breakdowns per game, they relatively were healthy all year. They got the breaks. They came, they were down in a lot of games. They came back. They stayed healthy. They need a perfect storm just to get to 8 wins, because you can't tell me you honestly think they're going to beat Nebraska on the road. They're going to beat an Ohio State team that has a lot to prove on the road. A Notre Dame game that's early on in the season, that's a must-win for Notre Dame. If they want to compete for a BCS game, they can't lose 3 games into Michigan State, especially if Michigan State shits the bed the rest of the year. This one right now, sportsbook.com is the only one laying 7.5. Right now it's 7.5, weighted under -115. It's interesting. A lot of the bigger offshores, it's sitting at 7. And what they're saying is, it's 7, but you got to lay 250, you got to lay -190, and Pinnacle's sitting at 252. So I'm looking at this as if I'm a total square bettor, and I'm looking at an 11-2 state team, putting up all these points. All the publications and the experts are saying, this team is going to be a competitor, they're going to possibly win the Big Ten title. And I see 7. I'm laying the 2-1. It's like they drop the number so low and they're weighting the juice so high to kind of blind you. It's like you're laying -250. And they only need to go over 7, but I'm looking at the schedule, and there's like 4 games that you can kind of say for sure they're probably going to lose.
There's 5 games here, like we said, that definitely we're looking at they're 1-4, maybe 0-5.
And using that as your math, are you willing to lay -250 when I don't care how much of a state homer you are? So even if they say lose to Notre Dame, Ohio State, Nebraska, that's 3 games right there. So there's 9 games remaining. You're saying that they're technically going to kind of have to run the table on everyone else. And every close game, especially on the road against Northwestern, on the road against Iowa, that they're going to win all of those games. It's not worth laying -250. I like the 7.5 at -115 sportsbook.com. I'd even take a little stab and take the 210, the 195, or the 155, depending where you bet, and take the under 7. I mean, I like the 7.5 at -115, but I just think the public perception on state is not deserved.
It's absolutely. I agree with you, and this is a situation almost. You hear me talk about trap games. You know, when I read a line and say, oh, they're begging you to take a side. I don't really get into the concept of trap games with, win totals for the season because it's, something that's spread out over the whole year. But when I saw the line and I saw the hype that's around Michigan State,
Right.
the returning starters on offense for Michigan State, a team that was scoring, 35 and above on a regular basis, and then you see a win total of 7.5 or 7. Come on, they're saying, let me grab you by the hand, let me walk you up to the window and pull your wallet out and make the bet for you.
I mean, to go over some of the games, I mean, right now, Wisconsin, 9.5 wins, Nebraska, 9.5 wins, Notre Dame, 9 wins, Michigan at 7.5. And that's even real interesting to me because the early line right now is State at home favored by 6. But the odds makers are saying this Michigan team, I mean, I'm going to be honest, is a lot of that's public perception because Michigan's a public team.
Right.
So it's weighted, but they have Michigan at 7.5, just like they do Michigan State. So, I mean, you got the Michigan game and a Northwestern game that can go either way. The Iowa game, you could argue go either way, but I like Iowa. You can't tell me they're going to beat Nebraska. They might cover. No. They're not beating Nebraska. Ohio State has owned them by double digits or more for, 7 games straight. Notre Dame, that's a must-win. It's in Notre Dame. They're going to lose that game.
And let's remember that game. That was an overtime game last year that Notre Dame really had won and let that game piss away. It
was one of the games they came back with that Michigan State had as a loser.
And not to throw a cliche at it, but I don't know if you remember that Notre Dame game. Just get off subject for a second. The coach, Mark, how do you say his name? Dan Antonio.
French or Italian?
Yeah.
Something that just flow off your tongue, like Polish names flow off mine.
But after that game, he ended up going to the hospital. I mean, the guy was having heart problems. During the overtime.
Shit, so do I sometimes. I have heart problems every Saturday and Sunday.
But he missed a couple games, and the team. That was kind of like a rallying cry for the team. I mean, you can't pull off, let's win one for the giver,
So you're saying the alumni is sending them like Big Macs and stuff to try to get his cholesterol, so if they start off dropping it, they get smoked by Notre Dame, and then they get, the Central, and then they got to go right to Ohio State.
You got to fake a near-death experience to get the team back on
look
track.
at this. Is they go on the road against Ohio State, then they got Michigan, Wisconsin, Nebraska. I mean,
that's a 4-game stretch that could take the wind out of you.
Yeah, they're not playing cupcakes here. I mean, even the Michigan squad. I mean, even if
it's a rivalry. Forget the rosters. Anytime it's Michigan State, you know it. I know it. It's West Virginia.
The roles are reversed for once, and historically Michigan has been the better team, expected to go on, and that Michigan State game comes up, and Michigan State's pulled some games out their ass, or they played competitive. There was all those years in Michigan when Ohio State was the better team. That the Biaka-Patuka game is. Anything could happen, and if anything doesn't happen, say State beats Michigan, Michigan's going to pound their ass. They have a new defensive scheme. They're changing things up. Then they got to go play Wisconsin, which is another bruiser team. I mean, I don't see it, and I'm interested to see from the forum guys what they think.
I have a saying with the rivalry games that when you talk about the role reversal, I say it when the hunted becomes the hunter. It's different, and like you said. Michigan State's not the one that's got something to prove.
And they're talking a lot of smack on local radio. Mike Valenti at 97.1.
Okay. So there you have it. Johnny Detroit says under, we're going to go with the 7.5 for the official wager.
And a small junkie bet because I can't resist fat juice. I also like fat guys. Not in that way, though. Don't get excited. And then we'll play it safe. As technically we can't. Don't get fruity. I know we're on the West Coast and everything, but I got my Midwest homies going to be watching this video in the next couple days.
That's why I want you to go home and get your stones busted the way mine have been busted for 3 days that you've been out
You're
here.
busting my bald dome as soon as we started the video. It takes you 2 hours to take those last 6 hairs on your head to look cute. How long does it take you to have those perfect little hairs. I mean, look at that. That's pretty good.
Don't touch the merchandise. All right, that's it. Well, I've had about enough of him, all right? He's Johnny Detroit. I'm Marco D'Angelo. You have it. Michigan State officially under 7.5 wins. We've got one more team. We're going to stay in the Big Ten. We're coming back with my win total bet. We're going to talk Ohio State Buckeyes.
Get ready, Brandon Watson.
The Criminals, the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'll sell my star. We'll be back.